What we're going to do is it's exactly, I think we will start now. It's exactly at
Okay, so let's go, Harry. So, and thank you for joining us on this conversation series on a digital platform supported by Cisco, complimentary, and for that we thank you, Charmaine. The conversation series are one of our 4 pillars for the IWFSA Leadership Development Program. These conversations are aimed at enhancing the member skills, and to keep us abreast of all developments so that we can make a meaningful conversation to all issues that matter. A special welcome to Professor Marwala, our speaker, and to our President Irene Charnley and our panelist Charmaine Houvet. Members, we've assembled for you a Minds in Digital Revolution. So, Prof, you can argue with me somewhere, but it's reported that there are 250 million fewer women than men that use this internet. Obviously, this needs to change. So this conversation will provide us some insights on how women can participate fully. And because of this topic, we don't believe we can exhaust it in 1 hour. So we are hoping that we will have a series of this conversation. So without further ado, I will hand over to our president, who will introduce our guest. And I'll request you, Madam President, first to summarize the conversation.
welcome, everybody. And thank you for really taking the time out of all. I know you're very, very busy ladies, taking the time to join us today for what will be, as Kuti said, a series of digital technology acceleration conversations that we will be having over the next few months. So today is really only part 1 of this conversations. And, you know, we have our IWFS member, and I will introduce both of them now. I think just as background, all of us, I think over the past almost, I would say 100 days, we are basically seeing that how the COVID-19 pandemic has necessitated the acceleration of the digital adoptions. And the session that we are going to have today are aimed at ensuring that we as the IWFSA lead these digital conversations. So we're absolutely in a very, very interesting phase. You know, I think we are all, the reason we are here now on Webex, because we're all still practicing physical distancing precautions, because we're also trying to flatten the curve and where we will eventually gradually emerge from the lockdown so that we can all kickstart our battered economy, because we know it has to really be built. So therefore, restoring and learning, you know, restoring all our learning and employment is for us, obviously, as a country and as women, a major priority. So kicking off the session, I would like, today we have Professor Tshilidzi Marwala, who, you know, we sent you his profile. Prof is the Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg, and is also the Deputy Chair of the President's Council that deals with the 4th Industrial Revolution. The President himself, President Ramaphosa, serves as the Chair of the Commission. So this commission is a 31-member commission, It was established, and their mandate is to advise government on all the fourth industrial revolution policies. They are to develop a framework for implementation of a multi-sector fourth industrial revolution strategy. They are to coordinate, they are to monitor, and they are to evaluate the multi-sectoral initiatives that will position South Africa as a globally competitive player in the space of the fourth industrial revolution. So what we would like Professor Marwala to do today is really to share with us the 8 key recommendations that the Commission has tabled to President Ramaphosa as well as to the Minister of ICT. Those recommendations, what I understand, are the output from a broad consultative process across the country with all the relevant stakeholders. The second person on our panel is none other than Charmaine Houvet, who Futhi also introduced. She is one of our esteemed members, and she's also the chair. She's one of the commissioners, and she's also the chair of the Policy and Legislation Workstream for the 4IR Commission. She's known, we all know her, she's a senior director for Cisco Africa. And what she will do today is to share with us the market trends, all the market trends that regulators, policymakers, and business leaders are experiencing during this time, which we call the new normal. I mean, things will never be normal again. We are in the new normal. So what we will hear from Charmaine is how business, academia, governments, and all the different associations are really working together, supported by technology, to survive in this volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous times to enable physical distancing. So what I will do now is I will hand over to Prof. Marwala. If you can maybe start by taking us through the 8 recommendations that the Commission has tabled to the President. I welcome, just so that everybody knows, we have about 25 participants on here, and I will go through the names. We've got Dinah Diamond, very welcome to you. She's a newest member. We've got our board member, Dr. Nomonde Mabuya, and Dr. Pumzile Mlambla. Very welcome to you. She's, we all know our former Deputy President of our country. And then we have and she's also an esteemed member. We have Aileen Walton, our member from Cape Town, Futhi, who's in Swaziland. We have we've got Gusty, we've got Imogen, all the way from KZN, Janine Hills. Then we have Madume Zulu, Selindi, welcome. And then we have our former, former president as well, and board member Nana Makhomolo. We've got our esteemed members, Shipra, welcome, Tali Knights. We've got the general who's using Totsi's, we've got Totsi, we've got our board member and chair of our audit committee, Trifosa Romano, our member, Wendy Lucas Bull, our vice president, Nolita Fakude. We have our Princess of Africa, Yvonne, Madame Yvonne Minga, better known as Yvonne Chaka Chaka. We have our founder on the line, Ma'am Zanele, and we've got Zodwa. As the members come, all of them are here. So, Prof, welcome to all our esteemed members. Prof, you're in the hands of the greatest woman this country has seen.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to broadcast my presentation here. I don't think I have the right to present anything here.
Can our administrator, Akida, Prof would like to present?
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for inviting me to come and speak. I must confess it's quite intimidating to be speaking in front of such illustrious leaders of our society, women leaders from society, our society in all different spheres. So what I would like to talk about today is really about the recommendations of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. We have 8 recommendations that we have actually given to put South Africa into a new age. If we look around the world, we realize that we are probably one of the few countries that have something called the Fourth Industrial Revolution Commission. Many countries actually have an artificial intelligence strategies simply because the most dominant technology in the Fourth Industrial Revolution is artificial intelligence. Maybe just before I go to the recommendation, just to talk what the Fourth Industrial Revolution is about. It is actually an era where everything around us, machines are becoming intelligent. We are able to speak to machines. We know about Siri. We are able to produce using machines. We are able to analyze information using machines. So this intelligence that is being embedded into all sorts of products and services actually is what is the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And then the technologies that define this Fourth Industrial Revolution, they are the technologies in the digital space. I will call it cyber, simply because now we have quantum computers that don't necessarily use ones and zeros, which is what the digital computer uses. So within this, you have artificial intelligence, you have blockchain. It is used in cryptocurrency, Internet of Things, where people are wearing clothes that are able to observe their bodies, and if there is any health issue, they are able to detect and call the doctor directly without necessarily a human doing that. And then obviously in the physical things like robotics, if you go to industries now, we realize that they are increasingly being automated. And also in the biological sphere, we know about gene editing. Now, if I go to what artificial intelligence is, because it actually talks about the recommendations. So here, this picture you see here is called a neural network. So you have an input. If the input is a picture of somebody and the output is who that person is, we can call it a person recognition system. We know about these systems. When you get in front of a door, the camera looks at you and immediately identifies who you are and opens the door. So for you to be able to have these neural networks, you need data. And because you need data, there is now an adage that says that data is actually the new oil. Because without data, even with the most sophisticated algorithms, you will not be able to find meaningful applications. So what are the elements of the Fourth Industrial Revolution that are quite needed is data and algorithms. Naturally, for us to be able to play a big part we need to have people who will be able to understand those algorithms, to understand what they do, and be able to build applications that could be applied to solve practical problems, such as automatic diagnosis of diseases without a human doctor, such as self-driving cars, and so on and so forth. So our first recommendation is to invest in human capital. And that human capital must ensure that we have the people who understand these technologies that are coming and changing our lives. And we believe that such education should be across the spectrum, at tertiary level, at secondary level, at primary level, even at pre-primary level. In fact, it should also extend to adult-based education, because many of the people, certainly who were trained in the 80s and sometimes even the 90s, would not be able to understand this technology. So there's a need for teaching people about this. Because what is happening because of automation, three things are happening. The first one, jobs are disappearing. There are jobs that simply are no longer going to exist in the next 10 to 20 years. We always know that jobs always disappear. I am told that in the 60s, when you used to get into an elevator, there was somebody who was employed. He was called an elevator minder to operate an elevator. We know that today there's no need for such a person, and we are able to operate it ourselves by pressing the button of which floor we're going. So some jobs are going to disappear. Some jobs are going to change. The doctor of today will have to use more and more technological gadgets to diagnose, to help him or her to diagnose diseases. And new jobs are going to emerge. Data scientists. In the 80s, we did not have such a thing. So we want to invest in human capital. And one of the elements of education that is often ignored is pre-primary education, because that is the time in which some of the big skills that are needed for people to succeed later on in the fourth industrial age need to be imparted. I'm reminded of a story of a certain gentleman from Japan called Mr. Ibuka. Mr. Ibuka was one of the two founders of a company called Sony. Sony was once one of the biggest electronics company. So in 1933, he wrote a book, and the book says 3 years is too late, which means start early to train people. Now, the second recommendation, and I've talked about artificial intelligence and how it is actually changing all aspects of our lives, is to establish the National AI Institute. That is going to coordinate all activities around AI, thought leadership, training, what skills do we need, and so on and so forth. Because if I were to think about what are the elements that we require if we are going to succeed in AI, firstly, we must have access to the software. Fortunately, a company such as Google and Microsoft actually develop these softwares and give them away for free. I suppose free is in inverted commas, as Huawei has just realized that the Android software that was developed by Google was not free after all, because when the trade war between the United States and China came about, the Americans said their software must not be on a Chinese phone. So we want to establish the AI Institute that is going to specifically focus on applications in agriculture, in health, in transportation, all key industries that we think are going to make South Africa competitive. And we actually, have realized that there is more capability outside the public sector on matters of AI than in the public sector. So it has to be a private-public partnership. Otherwise, it is not going to work. Then the third recommendation actually comes to from the need for these algorithms to be fed with the right types of data. I think it is very important to talk about the right types of data, because if the data is not right, these algorithms have been shown to do all sorts of things. We know about recently Apple had to withdraw some of their face recognition algorithms because they were discriminating against people of African descent. And the reason for that is because the data that was fed into the algorithm was primarily gathered in Europe, North America, and Asia, not in Africa. So we feel that we need to establish capability in South Africa around data. Data storage, very, very key. And we believe that there is not necessarily as much need to build data centers as they used to be in the past, because you can go and buy a cloud, a data cloud. It's not only just about storage of data, but also processing of those data. Now, if I can just give you an example, if we could have a single health database where when anybody goes to a hospital, whatever information, whether it is an X-ray image they take, it is put on a single database, so that we can be able to develop technologies around that data. For example, automatic diagnosis of TB from an X-ray images being done by algorithm and so on and so forth. So the ability to compute that data is also quite important. So that is the third recommendation. Then the fourth recommendation is around manufacturing. We have realized that South Africa has actually been deindustrializing for quite some time. And the reason why it has been deindustrializing, this is what I think, is because we have not invested into technologies for production. When I was growing up in the 80s, still in school, the shoes that I would wear, everything will actually be made from South Africa. Today, that is not the case. And the reason for that is because we have not invested in technology. So what we want here is that we need to establish a platform for advanced manufacturing and new materials to help reindustrialize South Africa. Then the fifth recommendation is about incentives. I think Robert Shiller, a Nobel Prize winner in economics, was once asked, can you please explain the whole of economics in one word? And his answer was incentives. You have to incentivize people to invest. You have to incentivize people to adopt technologies. So we are saying that our recommendation is to incentivize future industries, platforms, and applications of the fourth industrial revolution technologies. And incentives can come in many forms. It can be in the form of tax relief once you acquire those technologies. It could be in the form of support in terms of research and development, making sure that state-owned research organizations such as the CSIR are there to assist those entrepreneurs who want to develop applications and deploy them to various applications. The Chinese have a concept called the special economic zones. It is an incentive scheme, because when you were in the special economic zones, certain laws did not really apply, and you were incentivized to go there and invest. And then the sixth recommendation is around infrastructure. That if we are going to be able to succeed in this era, our internet, for example, will have to be fast. As a head of a university, I have realized that data is even more expensive because now we are buying data for all our students. And because and it is expensive because in South Africa, almost 98% of the data is actually accessed using mobile devices. Mobile data is much more expensive than fiber, than connected data such as fiber, ADSL, and other technologies. So here our recommendation is that we need to invest in building 4IR infrastructure, and this will naturally mean that the spectrum should be allocated in a way that is going to promote competitiveness, so that things are not necessarily expensive because we are using technologies that are not up to date. And then the seventh recommendation is the reviewing and amending policy and legislation. And not too long ago, I went home in Limpopo province, and my mother told me that you have a big family, we are not going to accommodate you. So I went to Airbnb in Thohoyandou. And then the whole transaction, you are transacting with a software that is in the cloud. So it got me thinking, are we even able to tax these companies that are operating from the cloud? Because they simply are not domiciled in South Africa, but we know they are domiciled in South Africa if they are operating. So this means that we need to update our laws so that they can be able to start regulating and also regulating these digital companies that are emerging across us. And then the other is just to amend the existing legislations to make sure that they are in line with the fourth industrial revolution. We have pieces of legislation that we have identified. The list is not exhaustive, that we need to amend. And there are other legislations that we have identified that needs to be created. And then the last recommendation, we really are very good at developing policies and strategies and documents in South Africa. Where we are not good at is implementation. I went to the National Development Plan last week, and they were telling me that we are not going to meet the NDP plans for 2030. And the reason is because our ability to implement is actually quite poor. So our recommendation is that we need to establish a coordination council that will make sure that all these things that we have recommended are actually done. And in my recommendation, in our recommendations, we also say that it has to involve more than just our bureaucrats. It has to have people from leaders such as yourselves coming into this council and monitoring this implementation. And the reason why we want that is simply because we have acknowledged that there is actually quite a great deal of skills that lie outside the purview of our government sector than inside it, and therefore there has to be a way of bringing that into operations to make sure that these recommendations are actually implemented. So these are the recommendations, ladies, and I hope I was clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. That is very. I think everybody's clear, and I'm sure they will be able to ask specific questions later on after Charmaine has spoken. I think the recommendations are very, very clear. You know, the investment in human capital, the establishment of the institute, secure the available data. We'll go through that. I think it is real practical recommendation. I'm sure our members will be very keen to engage further. But before we do that, what I would like to do is to give Charmaine the opportunity to share with us how business, academia, associations, and governments are really working together. Supported by technologies. It's how are they working together during this time to implement all of these new type of to enable physical distancing, but also other type of applications. Yeah. I'll hand over to our esteemed member, Charmaine, and maybe if she can just share with us what do we mean when we talk the new normal. Thank you, Charmaine.
Very much. So one of the areas I think where, just to build on to what Prof is actually speaking around, I think it's so critical for us maybe just to take a step back, and I think to understand, and this is the discussion I was having with APSIP and with AWCA associations, is that I think the important thing to understand and remember is that digital acceleration and the digital agenda has always been part of the trajectory for a number of companies, a number of countries, I think a number of organizations. I think the different and the difficult, complex thing for us that happened was that it was suddenly accelerated during the times of COVID, where we had to practice social distancing. And I think it suddenly became so important for us to connect with each other. And then one of the more obvious methods that was starting to be driven was digitization. And I think one of the things that we started to realize was how rapidly, from citizens to schools to organizations, we all started becoming very familiar with the different types of technology and how to actually start getting very familiar with these. In fact, it's always interesting for me to actually listen to Zoom suddenly becoming a verb. So people now suddenly say, oh, I'll Zoom you, or I'm all zoomed out. And it's interesting that we all understand this. And in the pre-read, I'd actually shared with the attendees this joke that's doing the rounds on social media, that unlike before, where it's often the CEO of the organization, or as we know, Madam President, the CIO that drives the technology agenda and that technology sort of pathway for the organization. This time, actually, it was COVID-19. It was COVID-19 that suddenly got leaders globally to sit up and suddenly understand and realize the very critical component that having a digitization agenda would actually contribute to the well-being of their citizens in the country when we were unable to meet face-to-face. I think, something that we've also seen during this time of lockdown, which is suddenly the new normal, is the number of platforms that we've all become familiar working with, from Zoom to Microsoft Teams to Cisco Webex, and hosting a number of webinars. And also very interesting to me, again, something that I found fascinating was how in the beginning of various lockdowns for countries, we were inundated with people taking selfies and taking photographs of them actually hosting different online meetings, because again, it was something that was very interesting and exciting for a large majority of the population, whereas for the majority of technology firms, this has always been the new normal. But I guess what had to happen was for all other sectors to also rapidly get to that state of acceleration that many of us were already comfortably at. And I think, again, what was very interesting for me is that the focus that so many of us have always had and been obsessed with and have been taught as technologists, having been in the sector for decades, is around ensuring your safety online, and how we're always so paranoid with handing out data so readily. We were now suddenly, online shopping from, 60 minutes. From Checkers, you could get anything you wanted online, from one cart, who went out and did all the online shopping for you. I was chatting to some friends this weekend who I know they avid shoppers, and they were saying to me, oh no, in fact we've never stopped. Now we realize that there's so much other stuff we can get from so many of the retailers. And actually, interestingly, I actually saw some statistics from Visa that were saying that prior to the lockdown, just 1.4% of South Africans were actually buying goods online. And that figure has just skyrocketed to so many of us now being so much more comfortable to actually transact online. And I think it's not just about the transactions that are happening online, it's so many other areas that we now find ourselves being so much more comfortable. And slowly we're finding how from citizens to government to businesses and even to youngsters, Prof spoke a lot about the whole human capital development, how even as early as those in grade 0 have been interacting and participating online with the remote learning option that's now available to so much of us. And I think, again, when I think back to 2016, when Professor Klaus Schwab actually was at the World Economic Forum in Rwanda, and he first released the whole World Economic Forum concept to leaders at Rwanda, I recall him making it very clear back then that there's this huge digitization journey that's awaiting all of us, and for many countries it's going to either be a time of great promise or it's going to be a time of great peril. But one of the sentences that he delivered that stuck into my memory, and it still plays in my memory, was that he said, regardless of how this future is going to unfold and regardless of what happens in the future, the one thing he knows for sure is that this can only be a success if academia, business, government, associations, and citizens actually work together in a collaborative fashion to ensure that we deliver on the objectives and the outputs of the country, to ensure that this digitization journey is actually successful. And I recall him actually then already saying that this digital journey is going to change the manner in which we work, in which we live, and which we play. And I think for many of us, this has become so apparent during this new normal. And again, I think what's happened, and I think Prof touched on things like Airbnb, on things like Uber, you know, I think this exponential growth has been coming at us for such a long time. And then it took a pandemic to actually seem as though it was a sudden explosion. But it could have never been this sudden if the building blocks weren't already put in place to enable us to actually start to slowly adapt to this, what many are starting to believe is going to be the new normal for many, and what, again, as I keep stressing, has always been the new normal for many. And I think what more than ever society saw was that the time is right now more than ever for us to start using technology to tackle so many of our societal issues. If we look at how governments have partnered together with corporates, it was so fascinating for me a few weeks ago to see the first G20 meeting, which is actually being chaired by Dubai, our colleagues in Saudi Arabia. It was actually so interesting for me to see this all being held online. It was a fascinating first for such powerful world leaders to actually come together and actually hold this online seminar and to continue with business as normal. You know, also very fascinating for me to see how very quickly certain countries, you know, grasped this opportunity. We saw an appeals court in Rio de Janeiro actually holding their hearings online for the first time and collaborating with a variety of stakeholders to ensure that this was actually successful. We even saw the first case being held with this US Supreme Court where, you know, again, pulled together a variety of stakeholders, even with the press actually looking in on the proceedings to actually test this and to ensure that this was possible. And more, you know, I think Prof was talking about how jobs are changing, how new jobs are coming onto the horizon. But also the news this morning that Amazon actually are one of the few companies who've announced that during lockdown, their employment is actually increasing, because for the first time now, they need people who can work from home to actually manage all of their online activities. So I think they have employed over 3,000 South Africans just to manage their customer service and their front-end activities. And I think, again, just looking at this massive explosion and disruption, I would listen to the children in the background helping the teachers out. This is like 7-year-old kids who would say to the teacher, no, you do it like this, or don't click that, or no, let me help you share. Let me unclick it for you, and this is how you actually share the screen. This new sort of disruption that's actually you know, forced us to actually understand that this is the thing with technology. It doesn't play by the rules. And again, I think Prof spoke about the Airbnb and how taxing actually happens in the country. It's a similar issue we all faced a few years ago with the strikes that actually happened, around Uber, where suddenly a lot of our locals were saying, no, but that's not fair play, because how is it that you are able to manage better? Again, that's the disruptive, and that's the nature of technology, in that when it is properly explored and when it's embraced and you come together in a collaborative fashion to actually drive it with a clear sets of rules and policies, then it has to work for the betterment of society and for countries as a whole. Again, I think something that we've chatted at length about with Sis Futhi and Sis Trifosa as part of our stream in IWFSA was the challenges that we also picked up as countries. And I look after the whole of Africa. And again, something that we're bumping across and something that shows itself up every time I talk to world leaders is around how not all citizens meaningfully participate, unfortunately, in fair access to the digital economy. There are still so many, I think, areas of society, none more so disadvantaged than women, when it comes to equal access and actually breaking through the digital divide. And I think some of the areas that we were exploring as a team, which we've been very fortunate in a South African context, we've been very ably led in the past couple of weeks by Dr. Andile Ngaba, who's also one of the commissioners on the commission that serves with the Prof and I. He's actually been working with the Fiber to the Home team and with various of us ICT experts in the sector to look at how could we, during this lockdown, still ensure that access to technology, more so the broadband and infrastructure, was still accessible. Because you can understand, if you've got 3 or 4 people in a home that are streaming, that are accessing online learning, that are accessing meetings, eventually you're not going to be able to connect as optimally as you really want to. So I think, a lot of us actually lobbied with government to actually release some of the high broadband infrastructure. President Irene knows this has been a long fight with the industry for decades, where we've been saying we need access to certain high bands of spectrum to enable this equal participation and to bring down the cost of data. Again, I do a lot of mentorship to various girls in the rural areas, where we're teaching them how to code, we're teaching them how to prepare for the world of work and the future world of work. And many of them during the call would drop off saying, I've run out of data. I've got insufficient data. Again, during the lockdown, we saw the Competition Commission step in, and the Competition Commission negotiated with Vodacom to cut data prices. They're still negotiating with MTN and Cell C to bring those data prices down. But still, I think we are a far way from that digital divide really and truly being addressed in the country, to ensure that this access, whether it's remote working, remote learning, access to real infrastructure, not just telecommunications, is free for all or accessible by the majority, to enable us to start to benefit from this digital agenda. I think, again, while we've been exploring how to stay online, again, I must point out, when it comes to women, it comes to children, it comes to those who experience the digital divide the most, we've seen a number of online attacks taking place. Again, there's a lot of awareness, and I was saying to Sis Futhi and to Trifosa, this is where we need to play a role in terms of educating and driving awareness. I do this a lot for Ethiopian government, the refugees in the different camps, same with Kenya for refugee, where we go out and we start to teach young girls how to stay safe online. And if you want to transact online, what are some of the things that you actually need to do? We also saw many governments being compromised during this time, accessing different platforms. And what's also interesting for me, again, when I talk to youngsters and I talk to universities, is that the biggest gap when it comes to skills and learning is actually in the cybersecurity arena, where we have, almost hundreds of millions of professionals worldwide, where there is a big gap in terms of professionals. So this is another area that we really and truly need to support governments around, is how to ensure that we are actually protected. Again, I think these statistics are quite well known. This is an area that, as IWFSA, the young leadership professional group, we are trying to drive, is how to ensure that we get more women online, because it is a reality, it is a fact. I see it with my work on the continent, I see it in all the articles that we write, that there are fewer women online than there are men. And then again, there are so many amazing associations and so many amazing drives to drive this. But I think Professor spoke about so many of the gaps that are imminent in countries that makes it very, very difficult for this to just be solved overnight. But again, I'm confident and I see it with the collaborative efforts that we do across the continent. When we have the right stakeholders around the table, these are again areas that can actually be addressed in terms of ensuring that we drive the right awareness and education to start to bridge this. And again, I shared the paper that Irene and the team actually shared around artificial intelligence and the role that women play in those algorithms, because again, when tech is actually developed, we find that a lot of the content providers, a lot of those who are responsible for writing the code are actually males. And yet we turn out to be the biggest users and end users of the technology, but we don't actually define and structure the content and the course code for how this is actually delivered. So in Canada last year, the team actually did deliver a paper from our team in South Africa around women's role and how we can start ensuring that we are part of the leading voice when it comes to pulling together that voice. Again, you know, I think we actually need to see how, you know, together with different associations. I know even now during lockdown, we worked with the women of youth disabilities, you know, to figure out how do we actually start bringing in the different technology to start driving this. Prof spoke about an AI institute that would start to actually house a lot of these types of technologies. A very big aspect of one of the fourth industrial revolution's technologies that were mentioned in our recommendation to the president is around Internet of Things, these different sensors. For many of the callers on the delegates on the call as well, who deal with agriculture, who deal with social development, who deal with women who are in different shelters. You know, again, I think there's so many interesting partnerships, and we've seen them happen in the parks where we have identified a lot of rhinos, where we use this type of technology on them to ensure that they're kept safe. We see a lot of big companies who actually use this technology. A very basic, simple one is when you're driving and you leave your home and you get a phone call and they say, "Prof, are you the one driving your car today?" And Prof says, "Actually, yes, it's me. Why?" "Oh, no, but we've picked up some different patterns that are coming through. We see that you're driving at 140 and not 100. We see that also you're taking a different route. Why are you not driving on the N1? We see that you're using a back route. Is it really you?" Again, how do we start using all of this data and technology and all of this fourth industrial revolution access to start to actually build upon that digital agenda? And I often see that this is only successful when we have somebody who is able to lead in this dialogue. You know, I think we've put in a lot of hard work as the 4-Hour Commission. Prof mentioned one of his recommendations was to hand this over to a team to implement. And I think this is where an association like IWFSA, again, from a collaborative point of view, can actually contribute by stepping in to assist and drive these engagements. Is this the new normal for us? Again, you know, it's difficult to say. I read a few articles where Twitter, Apple, Facebook are all saying actually they don't want their employees to come back into offices ever. They're very comfortable with the employees staying home. I never ever going to the office. It's been 3 years since I've really gone into the office. The majority of my work is done on the continent, so we don't have that rule. In fact, it was so natural for us when lockdown happened. The only thing that stopped for me was travel, but I continued from home. Is this still going to continue? I guess we'll just have to wait and see what actually happens. But again, it's limited because whilst we'd all like to work from home, not everybody has the access. We own a software company as well. Many people are actually asking to come into the offices once the president lifts the lockdown because they just don't have access to technology at home. So we'll have to allow certain people to come in and transact from home. So there are these challenges. Again, that as an association, we can help government drive when it comes to facilitating infrastructure access. And, you know, again, I think something that I've been saying in closing consistently is that when you look at going forward on the technology agenda, there's a brilliant saying by the philosopher Seneca, who said, you know, the fates guide those who go willingly, but those who don't, they drag. And I am still convinced that Africa was dragged into this digital acceleration. We did not go willingly. And I'm hoping that during this lockdown period, we were given this opportunity through these conversations and so many others that's going to give us this opportunity to start to craft our own journey to end up on that digital agenda and actually to ensure that we are part of writing the menu and we're not a lunch for somebody who's actually eating from that menu. So thank you very much, Madam Chair. Back to you.
just yeah. Thanks for unmuting me. Thank you, Sharon. That's wonderful, and thank you. In fact, that's a good way of starting by saying that our country, the rest of Africa, did not go willingly. We have to craft our own journey, and we have to write our own story. We have to write what we have to do. And I think if we look at South Africa, in any case, everybody today prepaid don't know that, but it was actually developed for the world in South Africa because of our own situation. We developed that. Now, so that's a very good way. Thank you, Sharon, for that. And Prof, thank you for sharing with us the, the 8 recommendations, the investment in human capital, the establishment of an AI institute, the establishment for of an advanced manufacturing and platform for new investment and materials, ensuring there is available data to enable innovation, which means we need that infrastructure that can deliver that data, incentivization for this industry, encouraging people to develop software, to develop applications, platforms, and all of that. And then the question is the infrastructure. There's a big issue that's been in our country that's been happening around spectrum, the need for spectrum, the need to build a proper data infrastructure that will benefit the country, not just a few. And then obviously that's linked to the amendment of the policy, etc. And then last of all, I mean, very interesting to see, there's also the recommendation that there should be a council, I almost say an implementation council within the presidency that could implement some of these and ensure they implement it and they just don't become beautiful words on paper that is sitting on a rack. What I've done, I've asked some of our members to on the chat to ask for some questions. The first one, I'll just go through some of them. In fact, and then I will ask some of our members to give input on some as well. So the first one relates to the education. I mean, Prof, you mentioned about the adult-based learning, and the question is, what type would you, as Prof, what type of adult-based learning would you recommend? And linked to that is also the other point you've raised around primary education. As people wanted to know what are some of the practical implementation of proposals that you have, and maybe very, very brief. There is a question, we have some younger people who feel that data must be free for everyone. We know the data prices must fall, but certainly not for free. But there is a question of whether there's been a consideration of data being delivered for free to the population. And then, so that's some of the questions. Other question relates to the whether we have, there was a consideration to have fiber installed into townships for what we call, to encourage economic zones within the townships as well, whether that's been considered and maybe share that with us. Then I think the other, Sharon, maybe just if you can expand a bit more on the role that women can play in digital transformation. So if you can, because you've mentioned some of the things, and on here I'd also like Dr. Precious, who is mentioning that there's obviously for STEM, which is science, technology, maths, and etc. So that all of that there is some young girls, there's some program for that. I don't know, Dr. Precious, maybe you can share that also with the with our members. But really, what is the role that women can play, and what role can we specifically play as IWFSA. I know the one thing that I like that Prof mentioned is the fact that IWFSA can monitor the implementation, where this council that's in the presidency, we could potentially maybe offer that we do the monitoring of the implementation of these recommendations as well. We do the actual evaluation and the monitoring, set up a system for that. There's quite a number of questions, so if we can just maybe get some of those particular answered. There was a question of, should we link to the education, Prof? Should there be a data science school that to assist with the new normal? How would that work? Have that been considered? And then so let's deal with that, and then we'll come to the other points. I will, as members put them, I will then ask them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe just to start with the question on adult-based education. I think there is now quite a great deal of online material that is available. For example, a company called Coursera. Coursera is a company that was formed by Andrew from Stanford University. And one of the first courses that he presented himself, it's actually my age group, it was Introduction to Artificial Intelligence. And it is free for anybody who wants to go and study it. So another thing that I really wanted to touch about is, how do you introduce these things at a young age? One of the things that we try to do now here at the University of Johannesburg and our collaborators in Brazil is to write a book on artificial intelligence for children and translate it. We are busy translating it into isiZulu, so that the concept, because it's really about the concept. When we were doing PhDs in AI, you are so much into the mathematics that you forget that you are dealing with common sense issues, which you can be able to explain without being too complicated. And there is value in people understanding that. So we need to go to online platforms. I believe that for you to be able to get somebody who will be able to do programming and so on and so forth, I believe you only just need 3 skills. The first skill that you need is the ability to communicate. The second skill that you need is the ability to think logically. And if you look at our schooling system, where does logic fit in? You can't be able to see it. And obviously the ability to do mathematics. And the communication has to be in English. Unfortunately, whether it is Python, whether it is C++, whether it is Java, the underlying structure of the programming languages are actually in English. So if you could get logic, language, and the ability to do basic mathematics, then coding just becomes natural. Then when it comes to data, I don't think data will ever be free. I think what the question is basically saying is that, can we find a mechanism whereby somebody else, maybe government, can pay for data? We have quite a number of bottlenecks that face us as a society. Firstly, we have not issued a spectrum for the last 15 years. I've tried to understand the logic of that. Why haven't we issued spectrum? So spectrum is basically the frequency that is given to a company to use for transmitting information. Normally, a radio station is given one frequency, whereas a telecoms company will be given a frequency bandwidth, which basically means it will be from one frequency to another. And because of that, our systems, our internet is becoming even slower. And because of that, our ability to implement new technologies that are emerging, such as 5G, are going to be severely compromised. Not only just in urban areas, I won't even talk about rural areas. So for us to control the data, we also have to make that whole sector to be competitive. And being competitive, I think we have enough players there to foster good competition, but also to make sure that the basics are there. Spectrum is the basic for that. Fiber in the township. I mean, we have fiber in the city of Johannesburg. I don't think we are using it. I suspect we are only using it to 20% capacity. So we have issues of implementation of things in our public service. For example, I have to go and buy connectivity from my 52,000 students. I would love to be able to tap into the fiber. I know there's fiber underneath in Johannesburg that is owned by the city of Johannesburg. There's even a company called MTC that is owned by the local government that is simply supposed to make that work. So we just need to make sure that our systems work. And even when we go to townships, we have to put fiber there. But it's not just putting fiber, it's to make sure that that fiber actually gets to work. There was another question on...
Sorry, some of the question, there's obviously the fiber installation into townships for economic zones.
No, absolutely. I think we should do that.
Yeah.
The question is, how are we going to finance it?
Yeah.
We actually
that's the key.
We actually have beautiful policies, because when these telecoms were coming in, there was we realized that there will be reluctance by this telecoms company to invest in areas where the economic value, whichever way you define it, is going to be extracted. So, for example, in my village, how do I make sure that how do we make sure that the infrastructure there is good enough? And then we created something called the Universal Services Agency that collects money from telecoms. Irene, you probably can correct me here. I think it's 2% of the revenue. That goes to this entity called Universal Services Agency. And what Universal Services Agency was supposed to do was to go to places where it does not make economic sense for those companies to go and invest and put infrastructure. Unfortunately, we know the stories about Universal Services Agency. We hear things about other things other than the implementation of projects. I cannot be able to show you a significant project that they have actually implemented. And if we have to count billions, I mean, it runs into, in the last 25 years, probably it runs into hundreds of billions of rands that have just disappeared.
No, thank you so much, Prof. You are. It's always really so great to just to listen, because you are so knowledgeable. You know, being I think you are expert in artificial intelligence on the whole of Africa, and we're very, very proud. You know, that you are actually speaking, and very privileged that you're speaking to us. Charmaine, if you can also then share with us the role of women, then we can also get some insight from Dr. P.
Got it. I think maybe just to wrap up something that Prof was touching on, just around the whole spectrum debate. And I had a question on this last night as well, was around the wholesale open access network, what is being advertised as the WOAN. as we all know, Irene, I think to Prof's point, it's a debate that's been going on for decades around mobile operators saying that they've invested so much in terms of infrastructure in the ground, and they keep refarming and refarming the same technology, and it makes it very difficult for them to bring down the cost of data when they're not being given new materials to actually grow and expand their technology in country. So what the ministry then came up with, the ministry then said to them, how about then we go out and we bring new players in? So again, to anyone who's interested in the ICT sector, the ministry is doing public consultations around new entrants or new players to the market around the wholesale open access network. What this basically means is that what the regulator and the policymaker is exploring, they're trying to figure out if we then bring in new entrants to the market and we then give them access to this high demand spectrum or these bands, which are so essential to them actually growing the business, will we enable them to go out into the rural areas? However, the model should be that they are funded by the big mobile players. If the big mobile players who need the spectrum so desperately are prepared to invest in a smaller new entrant that comes on board, the regulator is trying to figure out, will we be able to then better expand this access? And again, you know, there's a question around, is Orange now suddenly coming into country because Orange thinks that there's a big opportunity for spectrum? No, I don't think so. I think why Orange is reinvesting in the country, because remember, Orange was here a few years ago. They were here as a provider, and they were here as a repair center. They were here as
a mobile network operator. They were a virtual operator.
They were an MVNO. They were a mobile virtual network operator, which means they were working off somebody's network. Rumors are now, rife that one of the mobile operators are struggling financially, and they may think of going out there. If the Competition Commission approves, whoever ends up buying that entity, Orange is hoping that they can make a bid for it. But I think you'll know, Irene, that this is a very tough sector to negotiate when it comes to high demand spectrum. And I think less so for somebody external who needs to come in. And I know Orange is already operating on the continent. They're very, very influential on the continent, and they're already sniffing around in Ethiopia because Ethio Telecoms is also selling 51% of their network out there. So again, you know, it's an industry and a sector that is, I think, to Prof's point, so highly regulated. But again, I think there are opportunities for everyone on here to actually explore when it comes to the upcoming bids that the regulator and the policy maker are looking at to actually bring in a new entrant to the market. How likely is it? We don't know, because the previous court process was stopped where they had put up a bid for 3 billion rands they had said we'll auction the spectrum. Again, I think many smaller players complained and said, but how do you auction spectrum when not many of us have deep pockets? Rather come up with this different process to ensure that it's free, fair, we all have access to that spectrum, because we know that a lot of mobile operators can chuck money at the spectrum. And, you know, again, I think women's role in the sector is so crucial, and I just see it through the entities that I sponsor from in a personal capacity, like Girl Code, Geek Culture, I'm the Code. All these little associations that are going out there, all consisting of young Black girls in their 20s who are actually out there influencing in schools, in universities. They're running hackathons. We run annual, sometimes quarterly hackathons. A lot of these girls have actually placed South Africans from India to the UK to the USA. They've gone and they've spent time at Tesla. They've spent time at Cisco offices in Silicon Valley, in Amsterdam. There's nowhere that these youngsters, most of them didn't even have passports. We've had to help them even just get out of the country. Many of them have now left to greener pastures simply because there are these associations who are helping them think out of the box when it comes to technology. And again, the impact is still too little. There's not enough of us who are doing this role in communities. There's not enough of us who are out there going out to our public schools and actually extending and stretching ourselves in our corporates and in our personal capacity. So there are many areas where we can actually still get involved.
No, thank you so much, Sharon. That is fantastic. It's very real. I think if we enter this whole debate on the open access, that's my passion. But that we will have another discussion around that. But the one thing that this country needs is an infrastructure that can deliver data that is high speed, that is quality, that is reliable, because you need that data, which will provide the platform for artificial intelligence and all the new technology, the fourth industrial, to enable, to create that enabling environment. If there is a wholesale access, that means many women organizations, companies can buy data at a wholesale price, and they can resell it to anyone across the country. And that is very important for our country, but that is a debate that will probably require a lot more time. Now, can I just have, this was a very interesting question, which I thought is quite an important question raised by the floor. And I don't know, Prof, the issue is this automated decision making. Because you're now talking you're talking, digital, you're talking algorithms that's been put in machines, etc. Now, with all of these, and lots of automated decisions are being made, and the question is that making us immune to ethical and moral standards? And from a regulatory point of view, I know it's going to be very difficult. Regulators have tried to regulate, but the question is how will this be able to be regulated? Because there is some ethical and moral issues around that. But I just wanted, so because I'm just worried we have about 15, 16, 17 minutes left. So I just wanted quickly, I don't know, Precious, can you just tell us very quickly, you made a point to say there is some program for young girls, you have a program, just share that quickly with us, please.
Oh, thank you very much, Madam President, and apologies I joined late. I didn't realize that. I thought I was just talking to the team members themselves. I didn't realize it was going to be posted. But what I was saying is with the Fourth Industrial Revolution, we have a partnership where we are establishing the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution in South Africa, and one in San Francisco with the World Economic Forum, and we have also partnerships with, I'm excited to hear the people from Cisco, with John Chambers as well. So, but back here at home, we started a program called Girls in STEM, and I'm also excited to hear that there's so many other programs that are happening around conscientizing young girls from primary school about STEM education, coding, and exposing them to that. We need to reskill also. I was saying to Trifosa, she was asking, where do we start? And I said to her, we start in our workplaces where we reskill our workforces, because a lot of our accountants' jobs are going to be redundant. So we need to be reskilling those. But we also need to be doing that in our home, in terms of ensuring that people are up to speed. There are programs that are run by social entrepreneurs, and I want to highlight that also, that are on the continent. The beauty with the social entrepreneurs is that their projects, which are also technology-based, benefit society, not only make profit for themselves, but they are also for the benefit of society. So we have a lot of those, and I'd love to encourage our members who would love to be mentors themselves, for young girls to enter into the STEM subjects, to please support these endeavors. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that input. There's also mention, I think Aileen talked, there's Zindi Africa, which says, I don't know, everyone knows, a wonderful Africa initiative. There are lots of questions like how we're going to ensure there's an increase in training for new IR jobs like AI analysts, blockchain developers, etc. There's also the issue of, so Prof, in answering the issue of the ethical and the moral standards, I was just going to say the other issues, was there discussion about ensuring there are free Wi-Fi in public areas? What is the opportunity, for example, for this? Just a quick between you and Charmaine, if you can get that quickly. And there's obviously, I think there's some very important, Zodwa, we note the questions, how is 4IR going to include to be relevant to rural and poor majority of our people. I think the issues, we're not going to have the time to deal with that. And so this means there's really a need for another session. But if we can just, you know, and I think if everyone can go onto the chat, then they can also get some more in terms of, you know, free content that can be set for basic education. But Prof, if you can just quickly tell, how do we deal with the moral and ethical standards regarding...
No, thank you very much. I mean, that is actually a very difficult one.
Yeah.
And the way we are going to have to deal with it will be a combination of making such decisions, somebody take responsibility for such decisions. I am on a World Health Organization committee that is developing ethical deployment of AI in healthcare. So normally there are three ways in which you deploy AI.
Yeah.
One is human in the loop. If a human being is in the loop, then you know the human being will have to ultimately take the decision. The other one is human on the loop, almost like an autopilot. So an autopilot, you have a human being there observing what the autopilot is doing, and if there is anything wrong, then they can intervene. Then you have human out of the loop, which is where the algorithms make decisions. And we know the dangers of that. The New York Stock Exchange crashed because of algorithmic trading. So it is actually a question of choices that we have to make. For example, if it is a self-driving car, you could as well ask the owner if there is, you know, if there is somebody in front of me, should I be saved or the car should decide what to do. So, but basically the ethical issues, we need to identify what the ethical issues are going to be. There is ethical issues that will emanate from the data. Is it representative enough? We can have guidelines to make sure that it is as comprehensive as possible. You have ethical issues in the algorithms. You have ethical issues in the actuators, where whenever you have a robot that will take the instruction from the AI and actually have to do something about it. So it is quite complicated. Now, free public Wi-Fi is a good. It's good to. These are good ideas. The question that we need to find out is, how do we finance this? You know, is it through advertisement? When I go to some, you know, airports and I'm using free Wi-Fi, I have to give in my details, and every now and then I will get adverts that are coming my way. So we have to find a good model, but ultimately we need to, as you say, we need to make sure that we allocate spectrum so that we can bring down the cost of data.
Thank you so much. Charmaine, thank you so much, Prof. Very, very on the spot, concise and precise answer. Charmaine, Madame Charmaine.
Again, I fully agree with Prof. I think if you look at a lot of the Wi-Fi models that are rolled out, you know, whether it's in Paris, whether it's in Brussels, whether it's in the UK, a lot of these are often funded through partnerships with government, with business, with associations and a number of different entities aimed at a broader plan of bringing a complete solution and package to the citizen of the country. So you find in many countries, the reason why they provide free Wi-Fi is because there are different e-government sort of plans that are linked to the citizen. So you find in one country, the citizen has free access to Wi-Fi because it's tracking what type of learning they do, how often they exercise, how often they go to the doctor, etc., etc. And again, I think it's because, to Prof's point, different people are collecting different types of data. They also have much more, I think, free structured sort of models when it comes to ensuring access to different bandwidth and broadband. We've still got a long way to go on the continent when it comes to actually ensuring that these are properly regulated. So I think that process is now on the table. We are in the process of debating it. I was actually quite surprised that we even managed to get some of that free spectrum during lockdown. So it again shows you, Madam Pres, that the issue is not that we don't have access to spectrum. It's really more of a game, because how did we get free spectrum, high demand spectrum now during lockdown? And it's temporary. It's going to be taken away once we get out of lockdown. We're going to give it back again to the regulator. So I guess we need to start ensuring that we just hold the regulator and the policy maker a bit more accountable, because there's nothing that's stopping us from actually having this access. Again, if you go back and look at a lot of these entities like Kasi Labs, if you look at the innovation hubs that are run by the Premier of Gauteng, a lot of these entities are all running, they're lying vacant, they're open. In fact, from a Cisco perspective, when we were looking for infrastructure, we negotiated with the Premier to use a lot of those empty rooms to run incubation centers and to run online coding and development centers, because the broadband is in there, they are vacant. We just brought content and platforms to actually run off them. Again, I think, how do we as IWFSA go and partner with the different premiers? How do we partner with the different mayors to get access to these centers? And then I think the point that Precious made is, how do we start to run and collaborate, again, coming back to partnerships with the stakeholders that you were talking about.
No, thank you so much. I think we have come to the end of, I'm really apologize. Zodwa's got some very, very detailed questions that's been raised. Zodwa, also Dr. Nomonde, there's some additional questions. Tali has raised some issue. Our Nana has raised quite a few issues. Tina, I mean, some of these, Shipra has made some comment as well. So what we'll do is, I would ask the leadership committee will do a summary of the discussions and the inputs, and even add responses to the questions, which we will circulate. But I really would like to give, first of all, a really, really special thank you with much gratitude to Charmaine, first of all, for enabling the free Webex to IWFSA, to Solidarity and other organizations, associate organizations like the accountants, groups of women, accounting association. I think it's really, you made it possible that we can do that. I think once the 90 days are over, we will be talking to you about, maybe extending the free Webex as well, because it's very, very helpful, and I'm happy that it worked today. But certainly for the special thanks, and this is from everybody that's on the discussion. Thank you for what we call, some call it insightful, illuminating, and a real quintessential presentation by both Charmaine and Professor Marwala. Really, really thank you to everyone. I would also give a special thank you to all our members, all of you individually. I even want to call your names out specifically again, for joining us, for making the time, for contributing, and to really just be that energy and being that voice. I thank you to, again, Charmaine, Dina, Dr. Nomonde, there's a name there, I don't know, it's just got DJ and a number. Dr. Nomonde, Aileen, Footy, Gusty, Imogen, Janine, Nana, Peta, Pumzile, Dr. P. Precious, Shipra, Shirley, Cindy, Tali, Tina, the General, Toti sister, Trifosa, Wendy, Lucas Bull, our Vice President Nolita Fakude, our Princess Yvonne Chakashaka, our founder Ma'am Zanele and Zodwa. Thank you, thank you, thank you for joining us. You are our light. Without you, we will not be here. You are the woman of the future. You are the voice. Let us lead. Let us be heard. And I think the one suggestion that we as IWFSA can monitor the implementation of all these recommendations. We can provide the evaluation and monitoring mechanism for the council once they're there. I think we really need to take that up. So have a good evening, and thank you very much for making the time to all our members. Thank you, Footy and Trifosa, for setting this up. Good evening and please.
Goodbye, everyone.